Jacksonville City Council members Katrina Brown and Reggie Brown have been indicted, as we've been reporting for the last day and a half, on dozens of federal charges. Prosecutors say that their businesses basically handled tens of thousands of dollars in government loans and grants. Both could spend the rest of their lives in prison and face millions of dollars in fines if they're convicted. A lot of time between yesterday and when this is expected to go to trial, if it does. Now, they're due back in court on June 14th. Joining me this morning to discuss the next steps in the case is local defense attorney Randy Reep, who we should mention is not affiliated with this case. Randy, this is the first time basically that you and I are seeing each other since all this came down. First of all, your reaction. You know, we've been hearing on the streets about Katrina Brown for a while, but putting Reggie Brown into this as well. That's the,
slightly more surprising part. Obviously, when her business got raided late last year, it looked like things were probably 16, excuse me. It probably wasn't unexpected that that was going to come that way.
When you look at this indictment, is there anything that is glaring to you? And let me preface that by saying, when I read Katrina Brown's, and these are two totally different cases, don't get me wrong, you know, the lavish trips and the way that this money was spent, you don't see that in here. Do you think that should this go to a jury, it might be a little bit more difficult, since the defense attorneys are basically saying, hey, they did their best and this business just failed? And, you know, sometimes trying to get a business off the ground costs money. I'm just playing devil's advocate based on what they're saying.
It's less aggravating that there's not golf outings that are paid for in these trips, as you mentioned, but fraud is still fraud. And what it is they're committing fraud on a bank, allegedly, to move money. And what they do with it, even if it's altruistic, it is still a crime. So the U.S. Attorney's Office will frame that correctly, trying to convince people of the nefariousness of it.
Well, and I think what's interesting here also is that I was having this conversation with somebody last night who'd kind of stopped me on the beach after hearing about this and say, you know, look, when you borrow money from the government, $2.9 million in that SBA loan, yeah, okay, maybe you have a failed business, but, you know, that's taxpayer dollars, and somebody needs to be held accountable when that money does not provide jobs or any kind of business.
So I would disagree with that. Now, on that, if the issue is the business fails, the government is playing venture capitalist as anybody else does, and you can.
Does that make it illegal?
So, but the problem becomes when allegedly you're committing false invoices to keep the cash flow going, and you've heard the comparison to Bernie Madoff, and that while that does not really hold water either, what it is allegedly these two shell companies were now keeping the flow of money going for a business that had already failed. So I'm not too sad for the government or the taxpayer. They put their money on the roulette table and rolled, but it's the furthering of the crime that's probably a problem.
Which the government is basically alleging is that's how Reggie Brown came into this picture with these other companies and the money that was then sent or deposited to, you know,
which
if that's bank accounts.
If that's to be believed, they created truly a shell company, two shell companies, RB Packaging and A+, that never did anything but do invoices, and then that money went right back to Katrina Brown. That's going to be a problem if that's proven.
So we watched them come out. Katrina Brown said nothing. Reggie Brown, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. First of all, your reaction to the fact that he even said anything, because I know as a defense attorney, you're like, don't ever talk to the news media until this is all over. But also the fact that the attorneys have come out in front of this, even before reading all of the indictments, speaking with us, insisting, hey, my clients didn't do anything wrong.
Oh, I would tell you, any criminal defense client of mine, Alan Sabalas, if you're going to hire that high level of one of the city's premier attorneys, follow his advice. If he's telling you to be quiet, probably a really good idea anyway. And then it's to be expected that the teams that these two people have at least right now put together would be out in front of it, trying to control the narrative. Because as you pointed out, it isn't the Katrina Brown kind of case. It's maybe people that are just struggling to keep a business alive, still allegedly criminally, but yeah, follow the advice of your attorney whenever possible.
Yeah, and perhaps, you know, these of course attorneys know that should this go to trial, there are a lot of jurors, potential jurors out there who could be watching and trying to maybe sway some opinion. Randy Reep, thank you for your insight. Do appreciate it. We'll be right back.